I've got important things I should be doing right now, and naturally, I'm wasting a ton of time trying these new toys I got for myself. In 2019, I wrote a piece, Closure, that is still getting a lot of traction today, and I thought it would be interesting to revisit it now with the knowledge I acquired by experience, but also using different tools and then compare the two different versions. Not my usual type of content, but I had some very interesting findings that I wanted to share with somebody. And also very important, I'm not being paid by either of the two developers to make this video, okay? Whatever I will be saying later is my honest, personal, unbiased opinion. All right? All good, let's go. All right, so I've made this quick mashup for you, highlighting the most important moments of the piece. I will not play the entire thing in one sitting. I will probably be stopping a few times just to say the things that come to mind. And one important remark is the Cinematic Studio does not have a percussion section just yet. So for that, I've used BBC. So let's just play this and let's see what we got. All right, let's stop here. So, one of the very first things you might notice is that the two mockups actually sound surprisingly similar. Or maybe that's not very surprising because obviously same guy, same kind of taste. Also something that comes up pretty often when you look up, reviews for Cinematic Studio is the fact that it's sounding pretty dark. And as you just heard from my examples, that's not the case. BBC in my examples is sounding a lot darker than Cinematic Studio. And probably that's due to the fact that back in 2019, when I originally made the mockup, I used to like a much bigger kind of space, like a concert hall or something like that. And as you know, the further away you get from the sound source, the less definition you get in high frequencies. So could you make BBC sound similar to the CS examples we got over here? Of course. As a matter of fact, I actually bought these libraries in the first place because of what I've been recently doing with BBC, which was trying to emulate this, closer studio kind of sound. So yeah, that's to say that, what you will be doing during the mixing phase has nothing to do with the library itself. You can make any library sound whatever way you want. One other thing I wanted to talk about is this crescendo that we got over here. In the original version was just very good, I think, and I was not able to replicate it. And it has nothing to do with the library, again. If you play an instrument, you'll know, even if you're playing the very same thing, you cannot replicate it the very same way twice. And as much as I tried, I actually, when I was making the new mockup, I referenced the original one a few times to try to get close to it. And as much as I tried, I could not get close to this. And I think the original version is better than the new one. Let's have a listen to this again. That's just effortless, and in the new version sounds like this. of course, it's just personal taste, really. And I don't know if one is better or worse than the other. They're just different. Sorry, quick interruption. I've been told I don't plug my Patreon enough. The files for this project and the original and the 2 templates I've used to make those are available for download on my Patreon, along with many other things. If you like what I do, head over there and have a quick look. All right, so back to him. So let's carry on with the rest of the piece. So my main comment on this is that you have to kind of understand how sampling works. If you are capturing a close recording, so like a studio kind of sound or like a close mic'd instrument, you have a lot more flexibility in what you can do. And Spitfire puts all the love into capturing the room around the sound, while what you get with Cinematic Studio is a lot of detail in the scripting and a lot of flexibility when it comes to programming, you know, lines, lyrical lines. So that's very evident to me, for example, in this passage over here with a solo flute, which is very exposed. So let's have a listen to this part again very briefly. I think the new mockup here is shining a little bit better, because this is much closer. I can tell you that this is much closer to what I originally meant at the time. And the flexibility I was talking about is simply due to the fact that you have a lot more things to work with, like many more different types of legato and many different attacks and also different articulations. But as I said, BBC still has a vibe that is kind of difficult to replicate with Cinematic Studio, and I think this is displayed very well here. While this section might not sound as detailed in BBC, it kind of has a particular scoring stage kind of vibe, which I still really like. Let's carry on. Okay, not much to say about this, except for a couple of things. One of the hardest things to replicate in a MIDI mockup is probably repeated notes, when you repeat the same note twice. And what is wonderful about Cinematic Studio is the fact that you have those, like they actually recorded transitions between repeated notes, which obviously makes a huge difference in terms of realism. Have a listen to this. So that may be something to be noted, like if you want to add an extra layer of realism, you kind of need that, really, and there's no other way. I mean, I guess there are ways to approximate this, but it's never really sounding entirely realistic. Something really important as well, I mean, at least in my opinion, is still all these little crescendos I was still not able to replicate with Cinematic Studio. Let's have a listen to these. The original version is still a lot better to me. I don't know what it is, it just sounds a little bit more natural to me. But, you know, again, this might be my personal kind of taste. So let's move on to the following parts, which are pretty interesting. Now that we go to the louder bits, I think this is where the two different libraries kind of start to sound different. And the reason for this is simply the fact that, you know, Cinematic Studio has a lot more dynamic range, while BBC, I believe for BBC they recorded only a couple of different dynamic layers. So that may be the reason why these sections start to sound a little bit more different from each other. For example, listen to this horn passage. Yeah, you can hear it. You can hear that for Cinematic Studio, what I'm playing here is a fortissimo, you know, while with BBC, we are getting a more mezzo forte kind of, you know, dynamic. When I first wrote this piece, I wrote it in Sibelius, and the dynamic I had for the French horn there was a forte or fortissimo, I can't quite remember. Maybe with string and woodwind instruments, the timbre doesn't change as much with different dynamics, but it does with brass, and it's really evident here. But I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing, you know, because obviously having a bigger kind of dynamic range and having to deal with different kind of timbres, like we talked about, makes it a lot harder for you to make a MIDI mockup. And that's why I think the BBC version sounds a lot more homogenized than it does here, because having less range kind of makes it easier to blend one section with the other and not having things sticking out in an unpleasant way, which it does here a little bit. But I was trying to be faithful to the notated score. So that's to say that Cinematic Studio is a lot less forgiving if you have some, you know, flows in the orchestration. Like, for example, over here in this crescendo, I have quite a few different things going on, and it's very hard to tell what is happening. So it's sounding a little bit chaotic. I will not orchestrate it this way, by the way, today. It's very messy, and if we compare it to BBC, it sounds a lot more homogenized, but that's not necessarily what you will get if you were to give this to a real orchestra playing. Yeah. Again, that transition between one section to the other is effortless, just like we said about the other bits I played for you. So let's carry on. I mean, those woodwinds are just something else, man. Like they're so good, and you can clearly hear the definition and the detail they put into the sampling, which is, I think, one of the big strengths about these libraries, you know, the flexibility and what you can do with the programming. But obviously that will make it a lot harder as well, because I think BBC is a lot easier to use and you can get some pretty good results very quickly, even when you don't know what you're doing. But that's not the case with Cinematic Studio. My conclusion is, which one is better of the two? I honestly, I don't know. They both have different things I like about, but if I would have to pick one, I would probably stick to the original. And that has nothing to do with the library itself. I think it's the performance. Because, I don't know, I think what the original version has, more than the new version, is a vibe that I wasn't quite able to replicate, you know? Even if I still think that the new version is a much better mock-up than the older one, I still think, you know, the original version has the BBC version has something special about it, which I was not quite able to replicate in the new one. And also, as I talked about throughout the entire video pretty much, is transitioning from one section to the other. You know, with BBC was just really simple, and it was sounding very natural, which is something I was simply not able to achieve with the Cinematic Studio libraries. And also something to be noted is that I literally had these libraries for one day. So maybe it's a little bit unfair for me to, you know, just compare libraries like this. But, you know, back in 2019, it was a similar kind of situation. I wanted to be the first one to release a demo when the library came out. So I kind of made it in a couple of days, and I did not know the library. But I remember, maybe it was because I had some previous experience with Spitfire products, I remember being the experience much less daunting than it was a couple of days ago. If I were to make a new mockup today just using BBC, it would be probably sounding very similar to what we got right now. And that's simply because it's a different kind of performance, and my aesthetical taste changed in the past year. Also, I found this to be a very interesting kind of experience. I never really reworked my music quite like that, not to this extent at least. And I kind of learned a lot from myself, and I wanted to share this with you guys. So let's have a listen to the new mockup with just Cinematic Studio. I will link the original version at the end of the video, and it's probably gonna be in the description as well if you guys want to check it out. And yeah, let's have a listen. Alright people, thanks for watching, subscribe if you're new, like the video, leave a comment, check out my Patreon, and see you very soon. Bye.